Today, we're really digging into Jim Collins's book, Good to Great. It's hugely influential. We're working from this great summary you shared, which lays it all out.
That's right. And what's so interesting right off the bat is that this isn't just theory. It's not just looking at companies that were, already famous.
No.
Collins and his team, they spent, 5 years? Really rigorous research, looking specifically at companies that went from being okay, maybe good.
Average, even.
Yeah, average performers to achieving real sustained greatness.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack what they actually found. What were the key factors? The leadership styles? Some of it seems pretty surprising, counterintuitive even. We want to pull out the practical stuff for you.
Yeah, getting past just the surface level and understanding, okay, what principles were always there in these companies that made the leap?
Okay, let's dive in. The starting point itself is pretty stark. Good is the enemy of great.
It really is a powerful idea. Collins basically argues that the biggest thing holding companies back isn't usually failure, it's getting comfortable.
Right. You reach a certain level of success, things are good enough.
Exactly. And that comfort, it stops you from making the tough changes, having the discipline needed to push for something more, for true greatness.
And the whole idea for this huge research project, it actually came from someone criticizing his last book, right? Built to Last?
Yeah, someone pointed out, I think it was Bill Meehan, that Built to Last only looked at companies that were already elite. What about the rest? The ones that were just good.
That really sparked it.
It was the catalyst, yeah. So he got this team together, massive undertaking. They searched for companies with a very specific pattern.
A transition point.
A definite transition point, followed by 15 years where their stock returns were like 3 times the general market average, minimum. And they had to sustain that for the full 15 years after the jump.
Wow. So yeah, not just a good quarter or a lucky year. We're talking long-term sustained outperformance.
Like GE, obviously a famous example, but also, maybe more surprisingly, a company like Walgreens.
Walgreens, right.
Starting around, the mid-70s, they just started this quiet climb, steadily, consistently beating the market year after year.
And eventually,
over that 15-year performance window, they actually surpassed companies you'd think were untouchable, like Intel, GE, Coca-Cola in cumulative returns. Walgreens is sort of the poster child for a good to great transformation.
So how did they figure out why these companies succeeded? What was the process?
Super thorough. 4 phases, they called it. First, the search, finding those companies based on the financial data.
Okay.
Second, comparison groups. This was crucial. They found similar companies, same industries, same opportunities that didn't make the leap, or maybe tried and failed.
So you can isolate the differences. It's not just admiring success, it's understanding why success happened here and not there.
Precisely. Phase 3 was inside the black box. Thousands of hours of interviews, articles, internal docs, looking at leadership, culture, strategy, pay, everything. Trying to see the mechanism.
What actually changed inside.
Yeah. And then phase 4 was taking all that data, all that chaos, really, and boiling it down, distilling it into the core concepts, the principles that held true across the board.
And Collins is really clear. This isn't about predicting stocks or analyzing, the tech industry versus retail. It's about fundamental principles.
Timeless principles of management and leadership. And interestingly, it wasn't always about flashy strategies or being first with technology. It was often about discipline, common disciplines.
Okay, let's get into those disciplines, those building blocks. And the first one, it really turned some common ideas about leadership upside down. Level 5 leadership.
Yeah, this was maybe the biggest surprise. They expected to find these big, charismatic, celebrity-type CEOs, right? Visionaries out front.
The typical image.
But they didn't. Instead, the leaders of these good-to-great companies shared this paradox, a really powerful mix of deep personal humility.
Humility.
Yeah, personal humility, combined with just ferocious professional will. Intense resolve.
They call it level 5, the top of a hierarchy. And the idea is these leaders channel their ego, their ambition, away from themselves and into building the company, making it great long after they're gone.
Exactly. The story of Darwin E. Smith at Kimberly-Clark is, it's perfect.
Tell us about him.
Okay, so he was the company's lawyer, not your typical CEO path. Described as awkward, shy, apparently wore these old suits, didn't seem like a dynamic leader. But he had this absolute ironclad will for the company, fierce resolve.
And he made a huge bet, didn't he?
Huge, gutsy. Kimberly-Clark was mainly in the traditional paper mill business, which was declining. Smith decided, we're selling the mills. the core business,
Wow.
and investing everything into consumer products. Things like Huggies, diapers, going head-to-head with giants like Procter & Gamble. People thought he was nuts.
Mhm.
Business press said it was crazy.
But he stuck with it.
Relentlessly. And over the next 20 years, Kimberly-Clark didn't just survive, they crushed it. Beat P&G in several categories. Smith just embodied that quiet humility, but underneath, an unstoppable drive for the company.
There's another example, too. David Maxwell at Fannie Mae.
Right. He took over when they were losing like $1 million a day, turned it completely around.
Okay.
And then when he was retiring, there was this big controversy about his huge retirement package. And he proposed taking much less, donating a chunk to low-income housing. His focus was the company's mission, its integrity, not just getting rich.
That's humility in action.
And crucially, he picked a strong successor, Jim Johnson, and really set him up to succeed. Level 5 leaders build enduring greatness, not just personal empires.
So it's that duality. Quiet, maybe even awkward personally, but absolutely unwavering professionally. Collins uses Lincoln as an analogy, right? Underestimated, but iron-willed.
Exactly. And they captured this with that phrase, the window and the mirror.
Explain that.
When things go well, level 5 leaders look out the window. They give credit to other people, to external factors, maybe just good luck.
Okay.
But when things go badly, they look in the mirror, they take full responsibility. It was on me, leaders of the comparison companies. They tended to do the exact opposite. Blame others for failure, take credit for success.
That's a really powerful visual. So the million-dollar question, can you learn to be a level 5 leader? Or are you just born that way?
Well, Collins suggests that while, some people might lean that way naturally, the principles and behaviors can be learned. You can study them, you can consciously practice that humility, cultivate that fierce resolve for something bigger than yourself.
Okay, so level 5 leadership is the foundation. What's the next big step these companies took? And this one feels really backward at first. First who, then what?
Oh yeah, this totally flips conventional wisdom. Usually you think, okay, what's our vision? What's our strategy? Then let's hire people to execute it.
Right. Figure out where you're going first.
The good to great companies did the opposite. They obsessed about getting the right people on the bus. And, just as important, getting the wrong people off the bus before they even knew exactly where the bus was going.
Why? Why do it that way? It sounds risky.
Because they found if you have the right people, people who are self-motivated, disciplined, capable, you're incredibly adaptable. Your brilliant strategy might be useless next year if the world changes. But if you have a bus full of the right people, they will figure out how to deal with the changes, how to find a new path to success, no matter what happens outside.
So it's less about a single genius leader with 1,000 helpers.
Right. It's more about getting a team of great people who can figure things out together.
The Wells Fargo example under Dick Cooley illustrates this, right?
Perfectly. Cooley wasn't famous for some brilliant banking strategy. He was famous for building arguably the best management team in the entire industry. His thinking was basically, get the best people, and whatever challenges banking faces, they'll find a way to win.
And they did, even when the industry hit rough patches.
Exactly. And this also connects to how they thought about pay.
Compensation.
Yeah. The study found, surprisingly, no direct link between huge executive salaries and making the leap from good to great.
Really?
Really. It wasn't how much you paid, but who you paid. The key was getting the right people in the first place, people motivated by more than just money. Then sure, use compensation to keep those great people, but pay wasn't the driver of the change. Talent was.
Okay, so you focus on people. But Collins is careful to say it's about being rigorous, not ruthless. What's the distinction?
Yeah, it's not about being mean or firing people carelessly. Rigorous means applying high standards consistently. Holding people accountable, sure, but doing it thoughtfully, especially around who's on the team and if they're in the right roles.
What does that look like? What are the disciplines?
Well, first, be rigorous when you hire. Never settle. Keep looking until you find the right person. Collins talks about Packard's Law, basically. Can you grow fast enough to keep challenging your best people?
Okay.
Second, act when a change is needed. If someone isn't right for their role or for the bus overall, deal with it. Don't let it drag on. The best people don't actually need much managing anyway.
Makes sense.
And third, put your best people on your biggest opportunities, not just your biggest problems. Leverage your top talent where the upside is greatest.
Interesting. And this focus on having the right self-disciplined people, it even have personal benefits for the leader, right?
Yeah.
Like the Gillette CEO.
Coleman Mockler, yeah. He was CEO during these brutal, hostile takeover battles in the 80s, intense pressure. But the source mentions he still maintained a decent work-life balance.
No.
Because he'd built such a strong team. He had the right who's on the bus. They could handle things. He didn't have to be involved in everything. It freed him up. Having the right people makes your own job more manageable.
That's a huge takeaway. Okay, so you've got level 5 leaders, you've got the right people. But things still go wrong. How do these companies handle adversity? This brings us to confront the brutal facts, yet never lose faith.
This is maybe the core mindset. It's absolutely critical. Good to great companies weren't lucky. They didn't avoid problems. They just faced reality head on, no matter how harsh or unpleasant.
The brutal facts.
The brutal facts. But, and this is the paradox, they did this while never losing faith that they would ultimately succeed. They maintained this deep, unwavering belief in their eventual triumph.
The A&P versus Kroger example is classic here.
It really is. Both were old-school grocery chains. Both knew the market was changing. People wanted big supermarkets, not just small stores. That was the brutal fact.
Yeah.
A&P kind of stuck its head in the sand, denial. Kroger faced it directly, said, okay, this is happening. We need to change everything. They redesigned their stores, embraced the supermarket model, and just took off. A&P faded.
Because facts are better than dreams, as Collins puts it.
Exactly. You have to operate based on reality, constantly checking, are we still on the right track? What are the real threats? Not just wishful thinking.
But how do you create that environment where people actually feel safe to bring up those brutal facts, especially to the boss?
Good question. The research pointed to a few key practices. 1, leaders should lead with questions, not answers.
Asking, not telling.
Right, like Alan Witzel at Circuit City. He'd apparently start meetings with no agenda, just ask what's on your minds. Trying to uncover the stuff people might hesitate to bring up requires real humility.
Okay, what else?
2, encourage dialogue and debate, not coercion. Let people argue, hash things out intensely. The best answers often come from that friction.
Makes sense.
3, conduct autopsies, but without blame. When things go wrong, dissect the failure, understand what went wrong in the system or the process, but don't point fingers. The researchers saw internal reports detailing huge mistakes, but written incredibly objectively focused only on learning, not blaming individuals.
That takes discipline.
It does. And 4, build red flag mechanisms, systems that automatically bring critical, often negative information to the surface, so it can't be ignored, especially important if you don't have that level 5 leader yet.
But through all this tough fact-finding, you still need that unwavering faith.
Absolutely. It's the Stockdale paradox, named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who survived years as a POW. You have to confront the brutal reality of your situation. A&D, maintain faith you'll prevail. Look at Scott Paper versus Kimberly-Clark when P&G attacked their markets.
Right.
Scott Paper faced the fact they probably couldn't win head-to-head and found a different niche they could dominate. Kimberly-Clark, under Darwin Smith, faced the same giant but decided, no, we can take them on and win. Both faced reality, both had faith, just different strategies emerged. Both worked.
That balance is tricky, but essential. Okay, facing all these facts, the world seems complex. How did these companies simplify things to stay focused? Which leads us to the hedgehog concept.
Ah, yes, the hedgehog and the fox, Isaiah Berlin's famous parable. The fox knows many things, tries complex strategies, flits around,
but gets caught.
Right. The hedgehog knows one big thing. It simplifies the world down to a single organizing principle. Rolls into a spiky ball. Defense works every time.
And good to great companies act like hedgehogs.
Exactly. They cut through all the complexity and find a simple, deep understanding that guides everything they do. It's not just a strategy or a goal, it's a core understanding.
And this understanding comes from 3 overlapping circles, right?
Precisely. You have to figure out the intersection of 3 things. First, what can you be the best in the world at? And crucially, what can you not be the best at?
Not just what you want to be good at, but what you can realistically dominate.
Right. It's about objective assessment. Think Abbott Labs versus Upjohn in pharma. Abbott realized it couldn't beat Merck everywhere, so it focused its R&D on niches where it could be world-class. Upjohn tried to compete across the board and didn't do as well.
Okay, circle 1. Best in the world. Circle 2.
What drives your economic engine? What's the key denominator? The single metric that has the biggest impact on your long-term profitability, like profit per customer or per store visit.
Exactly. For Walgreens, it was profit per customer visit, which drove their focus on convenience, making it easy for people to pop in often. For other companies, it might be profit per employee or per region. You have to find your core economic driver.
And the third circle.
What are you deeply passionate about? And this isn't about trying to create passion artificially. It's about discovering what the people in the company, especially the leaders, genuinely care about, what gets them fired up.
Like the Philip Morris example, maybe controversial product, but the executives were deeply passionate about building that specific company.
Right. The passion is for the enterprise itself, the challenge, the work. The Hedgehog Concept lies right in the middle, where those three circles overlap. That's your guiding principle. It comes from deep understanding, not just ambition or hype.
And sticking to that simple concept, saying no to things outside the circles, that requires, well, discipline. Which brings us to a culture of discipline.
Exactly. Once you have your Hedgehog Concept, you need the discipline to pursue it relentlessly and not get distracted. How do you avoid becoming the fox, chasing every opportunity that looks good?
How do you avoid that competence trap?
By building a culture where disciplined thought is followed by disciplined action. It's not about bureaucracy or control from the top, though. Collins uses a matrix. You want a culture of discipline combined with an ethic of entrepreneurship, freedom, and responsibility.
So what does that look like day to day?
Well, it starts with having those self-disciplined people we talked about the first two. People who are intrinsically motivated and understand the hedgehog. They don't need heavy-handed management.
You manage the system, not the people.
Exactly. It's the difference between a level 5 leader who builds this culture of discipline and just a tyrant who tries to enforce discipline through fear and control. One lasts, the other doesn't.
And a key part of this culture is sticking fanatically to the hedgehog concept.
Absolutely. Saying no becomes crucial. Saying no to great opportunities that simply don't fit within those three circles. That takes real discipline, especially if it looks like easy money.
Collins mentions a practical tool here at the stop doing list.
Yeah, brilliant. Instead of just focusing on what new things to start, rigorously figure out what you need to stop doing. What activities, what initiatives are diffusing your energy, taking you away from the hedgehog?
And that often ties directly to budgeting, right?
For sure. Funding the things inside the circles and cutting funding or not starting funding for things outside the circles. Again, it's about being rigorous and focused, not ruthless in the sense of just slashing things without thought.
Okay, thinking about the timing of the book, 2001, the dot-com bust was fresh. How did technology fit into this disciplined approach? Were tech companies the model?
Actually, no. The finding was pretty clear and maybe a bit contrarian back then. Technology for these good-to-great companies was an accelerator, not a creator, of momentum.
Accelerator, not creator. Explain that.
Think about Walgreens again versus, say, drugstore.com. Okay.
Drugstore.com was all in on the internet hype. They thought the technology itself would create a great business. Walgreens, on the other hand, was initially behind online. They didn't panic. They waited. They figured out how the internet could enhance their existing hedgehog convenience, leveraging their physical store network for fulfillment.
So they applied technology to their existing strength.
Exactly. Once they understood how it fit, they invested heavily and used technology brilliantly to accelerate the momentum they already had. Technology didn't create Walgreens' success, it amplified it.
And Collins points out, companies have faced disruptive tech before: electricity, cars, TV.
Right. And the ones that endured didn't just jump on the bandwagon. They carefully considered how the new technology fit or didn't fit with their core hedgehog concept. The trap is chasing tech out of fear of missing out, rather than applying it thoughtfully based on your core purpose.
So all these pieces, leadership, people, facts, hedgehog, discipline, technology, how do they actually build momentum over time? This leads to the flywheel and the doom loop. This is probably Collins's most famous analogy. Building greatness isn't like flipping a switch. It's like pushing a giant, heavy flywheel.
Hard work at first.
Immense effort. The first few pushes, it barely moves, inch by inch. But you keep pushing consistently in the same direction.
And gradually.
Gradually, it starts to build momentum. Each push adds to the cumulative effect. Eventually, that flywheel is spinning faster and faster, seemingly on its own power. It develops momentum that's hard to stop.
And the crucial insight is that from the inside, the people pushing, they don't feel one single breakthrough moment.
Not usually, no. It feels like continuous effort. Build up, build up, build up, then breakthrough. It's only from the outside that the media or observers might say, wow, look what happened overnight. Inside, it was relentless, consistent pushing.
It requires patience. Commitment.
Absolutely. Willpower through that long build-up phase. But the cool thing is, as the flywheel turns and results start showing, that momentum becomes motivating in itself. You see it working. It reduces the need for rah-rah speeches or constant new programs.
Like Jim Herring at Croder, just focused on turning the flywheel.
Exactly. Now, the opposite of this virtuous cycle
Is the doom loop.
Right. This
Yeah.
is what happens in the comparison companies, the ones that didn't make the leap. Instead of consistent pushing in one direction,
They jump around.
yeah, new leader comes in, new program, doesn't get immediate results, so they try something else. New acquisition, shift in strategy, they push the flywheel this way, then that way. They never build cumulative momentum.
The Warner Lambert example fits here, right? Constantly shifting focus.
Classic doom loop, bouncing between consumer products, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, reacting to trends, changing leaders, changing direction, never getting that flywheel spinning consistently in one direction.
And this ties into how they used acquisitions, too.
Definitely. The good to great companies used big acquisitions mainly to accelerate the flywheel after it was already spinning fast and their hedgehog was clear. The comparison companies often used acquisitions desperately, trying to create momentum or buy a whole new direction. Usually didn't work.
And sometimes a new leader can actually stop a spinning flywheel.
Tragically, yes. The Harris Corporation example shows a new CEO coming in, maybe not understanding the underlying hedgehog or the source of the momentum, and selling off businesses that were actually core to the economic engine. Stops the flywheel dead.
So ultimately, that flywheel gets turning by applying all the other principles consistently over time.
That's the synthesis. First, confront the brutal facts, hedgehog concept, culture of discipline, all pushing the flywheel turn after turn after turn.
Okay, so how does all this connect back to Collins' earlier book, Built to Last? Where does good to great fit in the bigger picture?
Think of good to great as the prequel. It's about how you get the flywheel turning in the first place, how you build a company capable of sustained superior performance.
Getting from good to great.
Exactly. Then, once you've achieved that greatness, that momentum, the principles from Built to Last kick in. They're about how you take that great company and build it into something truly enduring, an iconic institution that lasts for generations.
And he found that the Built to Last companies, like Walmart or HP, they actually used these good to great ideas early on.
Yeah, the research suggested they intuitively applied many of these principles in their formative years to get that initial flywheel spinning before they became the icons we know.
And Built to Last focuses more on things like preserving the core values, the ideology, like the HP way.
Right. Preserve the core, stimulate progress. That's the core dynamic of enduring greatness, holding on to your fundamental values while constantly changing and adapting everything else.
And the concepts actually build on each other, like BHAs.
Yes. Big, hairy, audacious goals, those giant, inspiring long-term goals from Built to Last, they make much more sense and are more likely to be achieved if they're grounded in your hedgehog concept. It gives them focus.
And clock building versus time telling.
That links right back to level 5 leadership and first 2. Building an organization that runs itself and endures, clock building, versus relying on one genius leader, time telling. And the genius of A&D holding two opposing ideas at once, like purpose and profit, stability and change, that requires the kind of discipline we saw in the good to great companies.
So why bother? Why strive for greatness? Is it just about being bigger or richer?
Collins argues, no, it's fundamentally about meaning, about finding work you're passionate about and making your contribution count. Applying these principles helps you focus your energy on what actually works, what creates results. It can make work feel less like chaos and more effective, more meaningful.
And it's crucial to remember these ideas aren't just for the CEO suite.
Not at all. The source is clear. They apply at any level. Your team, your department. You can apply these principles right where you are, even in nonprofits or personal life, arguably.
What about startups?
Chapter 9 specifically addresses that. Apply them from the beginning. Build it right from the start.
And if a company is already great,
This helps understand why it's great and what disciplines need to be maintained to stay great. And look, no company is great forever without effort. Greatness is also about having the discipline to get back up when you inevitably stumble.
so if you're listening and thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, maybe powerful, how do you even start?
Collins suggests, first, really take the time to understand the whole framework, how the pieces fit together. Don't just cherry pick one idea. Then start applying. Maybe focus on the first 2 principle within your own sphere of influence. Or consciously work on developing those level 5 traits yourself, that humility, that resolve. It starts with practice.
Okay, let's step back. We've covered a lot. from that initial jolt of good is the enemy of great, all the way to the flywheel. It's clear the jump isn't about luck or one magic bullet.
Absolutely not. It's a system, a coherent framework of ideas applied with discipline over time. Level 5 leadership sets the tone. First, who gets the right team? Confronting brutal facts keeps you grounded in reality. The Hedgehog Concept provides simplifying focus. A culture of discipline ensures consistent action. Technology accelerates momentum. And the flywheel captures that cumulative effect.
And Collins really does have a knack, as this summary shows, for boiling down complex research into these sticky analogies, right? The hedgehog, the flywheel, window mirror.
Yeah, they make the concepts understandable, memorable, and practical. They give you a way to think about it.
Okay, so as we wrap up, here's something for you to think about. If Collins is right, if good really is the enemy of great, where in your own work, maybe your team, maybe even a personal project,
Yeah.
where might you be settling for just good because it feels safe or comfortable?
And what's the brutal fact, the one you might be avoiding, that needs to be confronted to even have a shot at moving towards something truly great?
Reflecting on that, using some of these principles we've talked about, could be a really interesting exercise.
Definitely food for thought.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into good to great.